Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're unpacking a topic that pretty much fascinates all of us, whether you're a student, an employee, a freelancer, or an aspiring entrepreneur. We're talking about wealth building. But listen, we are going to do things a bit differently today. We're completely skipping the hype. There are no rented Lamborghinis or fake promises here today. Just a realistic, evidence-based breakdown of how wealth is actually built, straight from our source material. So get ready to focus, because we're going to change the way you look at your daily grind forever. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why do the hardest workers often stay broke? It's a deeply provocative question, right? I want you to really think about it for a second. We all know someone, maybe it's a family member, a friend, maybe it's even you, who grinds 12 hours a day, every single day, doing exhausting manual labor or pushing papers late into the night. Yet, despite all that intense effort, they're barely making ends meet, let alone becoming millionaires. It begs the question. If hard work alone was the absolute secret to wealth, wouldn't the hardest manual laborers be the richest people on earth? Clearly, there is something else at play here.
Which brings us to Section 1, the hard work myth.
From a really young age, society drills this incredibly simple equation into our heads. You work harder, and you'll earn more money. We're basically taught to trade our sweat and our hours for a paycheck. But relying solely on that outdated equation, it's a trap. You end up on a treadmill. And fun fact, the treadmill was actually invented as a torture device for Victorian prisoners, so that tells you something. You're running constantly, but going nowhere. First off, you face rigid income limits. If you're paid a fixed hourly wage, the math is completely against you because, well, there are only 24 hours in a day. That creates this painful, unbreakable income ceiling, no matter how determined you are. Second, you have physical limitations. Your body and your mind simply can't work at maximum capacity forever. And inevitably, this leads to the third trap, complete burnout. And man, I know how deeply frustrating it is to exhaust yourself entirely and still feel totally stuck financially.
Let's move to Section 2, Mastering the Millionaire Mindset.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. Self-made billionaires, people like Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, they didn't get there just by working more hours than the rest of us. They engineered their success because they think entirely differently about effort, time, and value. It's the clear difference between traditional hard work, which demands continuous manual effort and more hours for a single, vulnerable paycheck, and smart work. Smart work is where you build systems and automated assets that generate multiple income streams, and eventually, those systems do the heavy lifting for you.
So how do we actually make that jump? Well, it requires some very specific psychological shifts. The wealthy focus obsessively on solving problems and creating massive value for others, rather than just clocking in to do a repetitive task. They think long-term. Instead of spending every extra dime on short-term consumer habits or buying things that just lose value, they focus heavily on investing. This is the incredible power of delayed gratification. It's an absolutely vital transition from having a short-term consumer mindset to adopting a long-term value creation mindset.
All right, moving on to Section 3, the power of leverage.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this right here is the absolute hidden engine behind every single wealthy individual on the planet, leverage. It's defined as using systems, capital, technology, or people to multiply the results of your effort without increasing your hours. It is literally the absolute linchpin of financial freedom. Think about it. Without leverage, 1 hour of work equals 1 hour of pay. But with leverage, you put in that exact same hour of work and it gets amplified to hundreds or even thousands of hours of results. It's a complete game changer.
Let's break down exactly how this works in practice. So you can have financial leverage, which is simply using capital to make more capital. You can have business or people leverage, where an entire team executes a vision. But tech and media, these are fascinating. Because through the internet, one single app built with code or one single video uploaded to a platform allows a person's initial effort to instantly reach an audience of millions. You build the product once, and the technology delivers it infinitely. That is how smart work scales up dramatically without demanding more of your physical time.
But here's the catch, and it's a big one. To utilize these forms of leverage effectively, you can't just hope for the best. You first need to develop high-income skills, whether that's sales, marketing, copywriting, AI, coding, video editing, investing, or public speaking. These aren't just fun hobbies. These are the highly valuable tools that generate unique opportunities in the modern economy. You need to master at least one of these skills, because these are the very things you're eventually going to apply leverage to.
Section 4. Building skills and assets.
So the crucial point is, what do you actually do with these new high-income skills once you've developed them? Well, you build assets.
Assets are things like businesses, stocks, real estate, and digital products. Simply put, assets put money into your pocket over time. Liabilities, on the other hand, take money out of your pocket. Like taking on massive consumer debt for a flashy sports car, just to impress people you don't even like. The defining trait of wealth building is completely rejecting that urge to buy liabilities, and instead aggressively acquiring assets that pay you while you sleep.
And when you build assets, this is the result. Relying on a single salary for 100% of your income is a highly risky, super vulnerable position. I mean, if you lose that job, your income goes to zero instantly. But look at this breakdown. Imagine balancing 30% from a salary with 30% from an online business, 20% from freelancing, and 10% each from dividends and royalties. By establishing multiple income streams through your assets, you are creating a financial fortress that is incredibly difficult to tear down.
Of course, the journey to that financial fortress isn't without its traps. We really need to look at the common mistakes that keep people poor. Things like only working for money, never investing, letting a fear of failure totally paralyze you, and constantly waiting for some perfect moment that, honestly, is never going to arrive. I also want to expressly warn you against trying to get rich quick. We completely reject that get-rich-quick hype here. Building those beautiful, passive assets we just discussed initially requires significant, grueling, active work. There are simply no shortcuts to building the foundation.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds into a realistic action plan.
All right, let's step out of the pitfalls, drop the theory, and get into a grounded, highly practical roadmap that you can actually apply to your own life. Here is a realistic 5-year framework. Year 1 is entirely about learning those valuable high-income skills we talked about. Year 2, you apply those skills to actively increase your income. Year 3, you start aggressively investing that extra income. Year 4, you transition to building scalable assets using leverage, and by Year 5, you focus on shifting toward true financial freedom. Now, I must heavily caveat this. Luck, timing, economic conditions, and your starting privilege play a massive role in everyone's journey. Timelines are going to vary wildly. There is absolutely no guaranteed overnight path to becoming a millionaire, and anyone who tells you otherwise is, frankly, lying.
And that brings us to a vital reminder. Smart work complements hard work. It does not replace effort. Adopting smart habits like daily reading, tracking your money meticulously, and avoiding lifestyle inflation, well, that still requires immense daily discipline. You still have to put your head down and put in consistent effort. The difference is you are now pointing that hard work in a direction that actually compounds over time.
I want to deliver this powerful conclusion to really summarize everything we've talked about today. Read this quote with me. Millionaires aren't created by working the hardest. They're created by creating the most value, making smart decisions consistently, and allowing time and compound growth to work in their favor. I mean, that completely captures the core message of our explainer. Creating value for others and leveraging your time intelligently are the true, undeniable engines of wealth.
Which leads me to my final, provocative thought for you to take away today. What asset will you start building today? Really think about it. Look at your life, step out of that daily exhausting grind, and use this evidence-based breakdown to take immediate, focused action. Remember, time is ticking whether you're building assets or not. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this brought you some clarity and excitement, and I will see you on the next one.